Nope, green.
Green. All right. Call to order the September 13th, 2021 Zoning Commission meeting. The time is now 7:01. Joe?
Roll call, Mr. Moore.
Present.
Mr. Leff.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Welch.
Here.
I'll note that Mr. Antonetts, Mr. Bishop, and Mr. Welty are not in attendance this evening.
First item on the meeting is the minutes. Everybody had a chance to look. Anybody want to make a motion?
I will, Mr. Chair, to approve the August 9th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Moore.
Pardon me, yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. Motion carries. All right, at this time, we'll move into the public hearing. The time is now 7:02. Maxtown Property 169 LLC requesting approval of a rezoning and preliminary development plan to construct a retail business on approximately 0.862 acres at parcel number 3173410500300, a vacant lot currently zoned rural residential RR, seeking rezoning to planned commercial district, PCD, zoning case number 2021-03. This is a continuation from August 9th, 2021. For those of you commenting tonight, please rise. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Do. Thank you. The following exhibits were revised or added to the August 9th, 2021 exhibit list. Exhibit E is the revised application and plans originally received August 16th, 2021. Exhibit I, Delaware Public Health Lot Feasibility Letter dated August 31st of 2021. Exhibit J, the staff technical review dated September 7th, 2021 for the September 13th, 2021 meeting. Exhibit K, the staff memo dated September 7th, 2021 for September 13th, 2021. Exhibit M, all public comments received between July 6th, 2021 and September 13th, 2021. I got to read this. All right. The commission would like to inform the applicant that there is not a full commission for this continued hearing. A majority vote of sitting members is required for the passage of any motion of recommendation. At this time, the commission would like to extend an opportunity to the applicant to continue the hearing until the next scheduled meeting date, October 12th, 2021, in hopes of a full commission. Up to you. Fine to continue.
All right, the applicant wishes to continue.
Okay.
Continue the hearing this evening. I guess I should be clear on the record.
True.
Not continue to October.
All right. So with that, hand it over to Joe.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, just another one point of order. I did note the applicant did send us some email with some supplemental material dated September 3rd and 6th. Would you like me to add those as part of Exhibit E into the revised record?
Yes, let's add those as Exhibit E then.
We will do that. Okay, moving on with my report. You all should have received my revised memorandum. In the interest of time, I'm just going to concentrate on the things I changed. There's no need for us to rehash all the stuff I already read. So just diving right in, I did change the memorandum to note that this proposal includes an associated warehouse component of the use. I realized that wasn't in the prior memo. That's always been the case. I just wanted to make sure I got it on the record in the documentation. We did receive clarification that the 0.862 acreage number is a pre-annexation number. So clarifying that for the record, the post-annexation size of the parcel would be approximately 0.829 acres. I know that sounds rather de minimis in terms of the difference, but it is important information for the record. And as far as also calculations on some zoning requirements. I was remiss to mention at the last meeting, I think it's important to note that the parking spaces, the way they've oriented them in the plan, are oriented in such a manner that the headlights will not shine towards residential properties when vehicles are parked within said parcels. All the headlights are either going to point north, which is where the building is, or to the east, which is also blocked by a building. As noted, the annexation has been accounted for now on the plan drawings, although there are some revisions that still need to be made in some areas to fully reflect it. Regarding stormwater, the system is proposed to ultimately drain into existing stormwater management system on Maxtown Road right-of-way, which we discussed at the last meeting. Approval of the stormwater management system will ultimately fall under the jurisdiction of the engineers for Delaware County and/or the city of Westerville. We did get additional letters regarding that electric, natural gas, and waste services are available to the site. Those have been added to the record. I'm going to jump into the sewer and septic discussion next. So the applicant has provided information in regards to both of those scenarios. So number one, sanitary sewer could be provided by tapping into an existing line at the southeast corner of Hillmar Drive and Oak Shadow Drive. Work on the right-of-way permit would be required from the township's maintenance department for any work performed in the township's right-of-way. An existing 20-foot wide easement between 7156 and 7166 Hillmar Drive would also need to be utilized. Said easement was established when Northern Lake Section 1 was originally platted and recorded on October 23, 1991. Site plans also indicate a lift station would have to be built on site. The Delaware County Regional Sewer District has final say regarding the sewer. Any sewer install project most likely also retains the rights to the aforementioned easement. The township really doesn't get involved with that end of the project. Moving on to so that's if the sanitary sewer option is pursued. Yes.
So I guess let me ask back up and ask the 10,000-foot question.
Sure.
Who ultimately has the say as to whether or not a septic system is installed or they have to tie into the county sewer system?
I don't know if one agency or the other makes the final determination. All they're going to say is, can sewer work, can septic work? If the answer is both of those can work, it's ultimately up to the applicant to determine which one they want to do. Now, certainly if the commission has thoughts, preferences, feelings, that will be important for the applicant to hear as they make their final decision on what route they want to go. Now, obviously, if General Health District, or the Public Health District, which is now their name, says septic's not viable, which I'm going to get into, they seem to think it is, then that option just goes off the table.
Right.
But that's not going to be the case here. But really, the ultimate decision of how they want to connect is really up to the applicant. And since both options seem to be feasible, so.
Is that even the jurisdiction of the zoning commission to opine one way or the other?
I think because rezoning's historically, because there's the section in the zoning code that talks about planned developments typically have to be either sewer, provided public sewer, or the language does allow for alternative sewage treatment options if approved as part of the development plan. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but that's pretty close to what the verbiage is. So I do think the resolution does provide the commission and the township the ability to grant the rezoning even if it's not technically on public sewer. So I think it's really more of a question of the township, the commission, and then the trustees is, are you just comfortable doing that if septic is what is ultimately proposed? But to answer your short question, no, you ultimately don't have the authority. If they go back to public health and public health says, no, turns out you can't do it, they can't say, well, the zoning commission said we could, so we're going to do it. No, that's not how it's.
No, I understand. They trump everybody.
Yeah, so.
The comment about the lift station, it would just be included in the building itself.
That I don't know the
Not
specifics
some other
of.
location on property.
I don't think it'd be a
elsewhere.
standalone like structure. That's not how I read things, but I think the applicant may have to speak to
Volume,
that.
but if it's only coming from their location, it
Correct.
should just be from a septic sump.
I would think it'd be something like that. I don't want to testify to that, but
Yeah.
that seems reasonable.
Reasonable, okay.
So moving into the septic, as I noted, the applicant is also considering a private septic system and has provided documentation from the Delaware Public Health District that it is feasible at this location. While the zoning resolution does permit other sewage treatment options approved in the development plan, as I noted, the township generally has only approved planned development serviced by sanitary sewer in the past. But again, that's not to say we couldn't do something different here. How our sewer service is to be provided should be finalized during the rezoning process, at least ideally, as it is a fundamental component typically and historically in deciding whether a property should be rezoned. Now, in this instance, I'm going off script a little bit. With a lot of times with the PRDs, the comp plan has specifically mentioned sanitary sewer, which is I think why historically we've required the planned developments to be on sanitary sewer. That verbiage in the comp plan doesn't exist as it pertains to these parcels, so I think that is an important factor to call out. But that's generally why it's always been the case with the PRDs, because it's usually been called out specifically in the comp plan as part of the recommendation. Sorry, I lost my place here momentarily. If septic is ultimately desired and approved, the development and drawing should be updated to reflect as such and remove any mention or depiction of the sanitary sewer designs. Moving on to parking, the applicant provided a square footage breakdown of how the building is to be utilized, which demonstrates the number of parking spaces they are proposing is actually compliant with the zoning resolution, so that was good to see. We have that all documented. The proposed drive aisle widths of the parking lot have been revised to the code compliant 25 feet, so that was good to see. That's no longer an issue. Just a minor correction, the green space buffer for the properties in the north is 67 feet. That was a slight change in what I previously had written. Some of the landscaping buffering has changed for the site. The plan would retain 6 existing trees along the site's eastern border and now add 12 new evergreen tree plantings in said area, which is an increase from what the previous proposal was by several trees. The plan would also retain 3 existing trees in the vicinity of the site's northern border and add 10 new evergreen plantings in said area, which is a significant increase in the number of plantings and trees in this area compared to the prior proposal. Item number 4 here, I'm going to read a little bit and then go off script a little bit because what I wrote in its entirety isn't entirely accurate. White vinyl privacy fencing with a height of approximately 6 feet will be provided along the northern portion of the site's western border. I have that, I believe I have that correct. I incorrectly cited that they were also proposing existing fencing along the entirety of the site's northern and portion of the eastern border. However, I misread the plans and failed to see the note that they called out that section of fencing as being existing. So what they did was just depict the existing fencing that the neighbors have on the drawing, just so the commission could get a better understanding of exactly what the conditions are out there. So the memo as written is incorrect. As I noted previously, the existing fencing on the neighboring properties can't count towards the requirements, but it is important to understand sort of the grand scheme of what's going on out here on this site. The fact that that fencing isn't actually there or is off-site isn't necessarily a concern to staff because I noted they're planting a lot of trees in those areas, so they've met the buffering requirements for those areas. Even if those fences were to get torn down, they would still be compliant on their side of the property line in regards to the buffering. Moving on. Similar fencing has also been proposed along the entirety of the northern end of the western parking lot and around the proposed southward-facing dumpster enclosure. So that and further adds to some of the screening, especially for the property to the north of the parking and loading and dumpster area. In staff's opinion, additional tree will need to be provided towards the southern end of each side of the property lines on the east and west sides to adequately screen the improved areas from neighboring properties, so long as such trees wouldn't interfere with any site distance issues. I felt like, especially on the east side, like if you draw a line for where the last tree is, you still have a little bit of parking lot exposed to the south of that, where the south of that imaginary line would be, so an additional tree would cover that area, and I felt like the same on the, I've used the laser pointer, but they don't work on those TVs. So actually, I'll just, if everyone wants to know where I'm talking about, I'll just take the microphone with me and point to it real quick. So the areas I'm talking about are here and here. Moving on, regards to landscaping, should this application be approved at the time of final development plan application, the landscaping plan will also need to demonstrate how the plan complies with the zoning resolution's landscaping standards, especially the screening height requirements of section 2003-03 and 2003-06 as it relates to the parking lot plantings. The current plantings being non-evergreen and less than 5.5 feet in height, and I'm talking about the ones adjacent to the front parking area between Maxtown Road and the parking area, are not compliant and may require divergence if what is proposed is preferred or desired. Said plan will also need to identify how said parking lot plantings will be protected from vehicles. Obviously, if the parking space is not facing those plantings, it's probably candidly is not much of a concern because the chance of a vehicle pulling too far on that curb, I guess they could back over them, but typically we have more concern when those plantings are at the end of a parking space because people sometimes pull too forward and will run them over and crush them and kill them. Regarding open space, due Due to the post-annexation issues called out in the previous items of this memo and a lack of the required open space plan drawing in the packet, staff couldn't verify whether the amount of proposed pervious area on this lot is compliant or computed accurately. The lot coverage figure provided in the landscape drawing, which is L1.2, under zoning notes item 1, currently uses the pre-annexation acreage, which is incorrect and needs to be revised on said drawing, in the development text and in the general project information table on sheet 1 of 3 of the plan drawing set. I don't think at the end of the day they're going to run into a compliance issue. I still think what they're proposing is probably going to be compliant when you crunch the numbers. We just need the numbers to be accurately calculated in the materials. Regarding lighting, some sample imagery related to site lighting was provided. However, a conceptual site lighting plan has not yet been provided. The applicant will need to demonstrate that the parking lot will be illuminated to comply with the zoning resolution. And one of their following correspondences that we just added it to the record as part of the exhibit list, they did note that their intention is to not light the parking lot at all. I'm not necessarily in disagreement with that. I just know the code says, though, if a parking lot's to be used at night, it has to be lit. So either it's going to have to be lit, or if the commission's agreeable with the proposal, a divergence may need to be added for that standard. Regarding signage, I had, if you recall my previous report on this last month, I had some concerns about whether the electronic message center sign is compliant. The drawing you see on the screen is the one that was submitted with the revised materials. The even more revised materials we received last week contained an updated drawing, which basically said a note that said the EMC will be no more than essentially 50% of the permitted sign area. At this stage in game, that's acceptable. They've acknowledged that the requirement exists and have basically written that they're going to comply with it. Should the application be approved at the time of final, we will want to see the actual measurements, because that's what we're going to have to write the permit for the sign on. But at this point, they've demonstrated they're aware and they've agreed to comply with the standard, at least in principle. So that's all I'm looking for right now. There was also concern about the lighting being turned off during the designated hours. You can see on this note down here, it talked about the EMC board being turned off between midnight and 6 a.m. But that standard also applies to any other lighting of the sign. And again, the revised drawing we received last week, which I'm sorry we don't have a copy of right now, up, also spoke to that issue and agreed to that term as well. So I no longer have that concern either, because they've documented that they understand and will agree to that provision as well. So that means between midnight and 6 a.m. that sign should be completely dark. Which is compliant with the terms of the zoning resolution. Updating some verbiage in the divergence request. I noted the correction to the 67-foot buffer correction, which I already noted, the 12 trees, which are now proposed, as I already noted. Clarifying that the proposed front yard setback is actually 15 feet when you factor in the right-of-way. That's 15. So the total number of existing trees along the eastern border will be 18, and then the total number of trees proposed along the northern border will be 13, and that's when you factor in the existing trees plus the new trees that they're proposing. I'm sorry I'm bouncing around a little bit, I know, so I'll be happy to clarify any of this during the discussion period. The proposed plantings along the western lot line, which I pointed out to when I walked up there, being deciduous, do not comply with section 2003-02 as required by section 1203-03B. So this request is essentially a divergence to section 2003-02 as well. So basically the short of that is the trees that they're proposing along the western line aren't compliant, but I don't think they need to ask for another divergence to the code, because I think that proposal is wrapped up already in this existing divergence. I think you're sort of getting two birds with one divergence, essentially. Because if you're agreeable to what's proposing, you're obviously agreeable to the deciduous instead of the evergreen requirement. And clarification for the divergence related to section 1208.01, which requires buildings be placed no closer than 100 feet to any district boundary line or street right-of-way. I just put in the exact building setbacks for the record. It's 69 feet from the front, 67 feet from the rear, 47 feet from the east side property line, and 54 feet from the side west property line. So just clarification for the record, that is what's currently being proposed, those setbacks. The measurements for front yard setback depth and front yard building setback depth include the 10-foot wide area of Maxtown Road that is being annexed. This area cannot count towards these measurements, hence why I came up with 15 feet instead of the 25 feet that the applicant listed. I had to take the 10 feet off the 25 because they didn't account for that 25 feet. And then that 79 feet that they cited is what becomes that 69 feet that I just cited. Since divergences for these standards are already being requested, the design of the site does not need to be changed, just the verbiage and wording of the divergence request itself for the accuracy needs to be revised. So again, it's not necessarily a compliance issue as long if the commission's agreeable to the divergence. It's just about making sure we're saying the right numbers in terms of what the measurements actually are. A section of the development text indicates a divergence relative to section 120405 has been requested, but no such request appears in the official list of requested divergences within the development text or on the plan drawing. If such a request is being made, it will need to be added to the aforementioned documents. If not, the response to section 120405 in the development text needs to be revised. I updated some of the information in regards to my report on the comprehensive plan. I noted it's the 2019 iteration of the comprehensive plan that we're reviewing this against. And I also wanted to make sure I read out the specific verbiage from the plan. Its recommendation reads, the recommendation is significant visual, or I'm sorry, I'm just going to read this in its entirety so it makes sense. The 2019 comprehensive plan recommends planned commercial utilization of this property in Chapter 4, Planning Area 6 recommendations, with quote, significant visual screening and noise barriers for the single-family homes to the north. This specific recommendation dates back to the 2008 iteration of the comprehensive plan, so it's roughly, what is that, 11 years old or so. A similar recommendation existed in the 1999 comprehensive plan, which noted that the properties on Maxtown Road will develop in a manner similar to the existing commercial and industrial development within the vicinity. And it stated, further encroachment of residential development into this area should be discouraged. So essentially, the township's been on record that since 1999, residential use of this property or any of the other properties to the west was not a good idea, and that we probably should look at rezoning it commercial. Regarding the DCRPC recommendation, if you remember, they had recommended conditional approval with the condition being additional screening of the neighboring residential properties. I mean, I don't want to speak for the RPC. They didn't review this plan again, but I would think the addition of the several trees meet the spirit and intent of that condition that the Regional Planning Commission had offered. I did have one additional staff recommendation that's not a compliance item, just a recommendation that the commission and the applicant are free to ignore. And that was adding shrubs at the eastern end of the front parking lot, so any headlights from vehicles driving down the drive aisle do not shine into the residential property to the east. So if you bear with me, I am just gonna, probably easier to point that out on the drawing as well. So my concern is cars parked this way, their headlights are just gonna be pointing at the building or the parking lot, but there will be a moment where they're pointed this direction towards this property. And I know there's a couple trees here, but I feel like another row of shrubs similar to the ones that were proposed here would help further block those headlights. Not a code requirement, but something I observed and thought might be a good addition. Final commentary from the memo before I jump into the technical review document, which will be a very brief discussion. I should note that any agreed upon revisions or changes to the plan tonight need to be really probably clearly mentioned in the motion if there is one tonight, because the board will want to know exactly what it is the commission's recommending and voting on. I also will want to note that conditions at this stage would be discouraged because you're doing a rezoning and you don't want to run into a contract zoning situation where, okay, if you do this, we're okay with this. So I think we'll just need to be a little careful if a motion is granted tonight, just how we word it and make it as clear as possible for the trustees. Obviously, the trustees have the ability to vote on a modified plan. That's not impossible for them, but also would be ideal if we could get something to them as clean as possible, so they don't have to try to figure all that out at their review. Jumping into the tech review, I think I only have one item in the tech review that I didn't already discuss in the memo, and that was under development review, comment number 14, subsection D. Should this application be approved, the final development plans will need to demonstrate that, one, the existing white pines on the site, which they're proposing to retain, are healthy and of good enough quality to provide sufficient screening. And two, newly proposed screening plantings will have an install height of at least 5.5 feet per the previously referenced code section that I already mentioned this evening. There is currently some conflicting information in the submission. Some of the labels say the plants will be 5 to 6 feet, which would not be compliant, while the note on page L2 commits to the 5.5 foot requirement. So we just need to make sure it is going to be at least 5.5 feet, because anything less than that would not be code compliant. So again, my apologies for jumping around, but I just wanted to hit on the highlights of the revisions since we'd already gone through the meat of the proposal during the prior hearing. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, we'll hear from the applicant.
Yeah, we had a PowerPoint presentation.
I believe he's going to pull it up right now for you.
So do I tell you? Oh, okay.
He'll just need to know if you want him to change his slide. Oh, never mind. He's going to bring it up for you.
Excuse me. Joni and I are glad to be back before you to answer any questions you might have. I think at the August 9th meeting,
Say your name,
I'm sorry.
address, and then we can go.
Pat Mandrell, 169 North Otterbein Avenue, Westerville. So Joni and I are glad to be back to talk to you and answer any questions you might have regarding the rezoning. I think in the August meeting, we did a fairly good job of introducing ourselves, our business, what we did, the plot of land. We answered a lot of questions in regards to sewer and parking and trash and lighting and all that. But my takeaway from the meeting, I felt like there were still 4 areas that still need to be addressed, and those are the 4 I'd like to talk about tonight. The first one is there was discussion from the fire department if the parking lot was suitable for them to service our building. So we sent the deputy fire marshal the plot land so he could review it, and he sent a letter back confirming that the parking is fine and the entry into the building will be okay. I spoke to him via phone. The conversation came up at the last meeting that we didn't have any doors on the north side or the east side, and he said until he sees the inside of the layout of the building, he really can't make any comment because it kind of depends on where people are working, if they're, if they need an exit or not. So I guess that'd be done at a later state. He stated that all we need outside that door, if we put a door in, is a small cement pad. We don't need a walkway or anything getting to that door. So just general information. The next topic that I want to cover is the trash service came up. This is the company I presently do business with, Local Waste Services. We have their smallest container of dumpster, which is a 6x6. They come twice a month to empty our trash, and we would continue that service. So they did acknowledge in this letter that, once again, I sent an email with our plot layout, and he said the parking's fine for their truck to go in and service our dumpster. The other thing with that is, I wanted to say something else. And they do trash pickup during the day, not in the middle of the night. So they start at 7 a.m. And like I said, we get service twice a month. The other thing that I think everybody's concerned about with the dumpster is if people are going to see it. We don't want to see it. I'm sure everybody else doesn't want to see it. So when Joe was talking about the white fencing, this is what we had referred to. So I think there was miscommunication with the back of the lot. The white fencing will be around the dumpster area. It'll be totally enclosed, 6 feet high, 2 doors on the south end, so the truck can come in, open the doors, and empty the trash and go back out. So I think we're fine on trash as far as, it's going to be totally enclosed. It is on the west side of the property. It's not on the east side by the Hillmar people. So I think we have the trash as far away as we can, and once again, it is totally enclosed. The next thing I'd like to talk about that I wasn't ready to finalize because I didn't know what the board wanted or the neighbors wanted was the question of the fence on fence. I was kind of confused about that as far as how we offer privacy, if because they had a fence up, if that was good enough, and what I learned from the last meeting that it wasn't. So this is my sketch that I sent to the landscapers as far as what I want, and we'll get to what they finally proposed to you people. If we start on the upper east side, we are putting 2 more white pines there in front of house number 1, I'll call it. And then the other open circles are where there's already beautiful 20-foot high white pines. As we go to the second house, we'll continue with a couple more white pines, but introduce a couple more of the dense evergreens plantings. And I'm sorry that we confuse you with our plan. We said 5 to 6 foot. I thought that was, I didn't know trees have to be a certain height, but we are totally in agreement that 5.5 feet high is fine by us. And then the third house would have dense evergreens there. And then, of course, there's already a couple existing trees. And then along the whole north back side will be more dense evergreens. Then coming up the west side where the blue line is, that is where we will be installing a fence. It'll be 6 foot tall, 5.5, whatever it comes out to be. Exactly like the 2 neighbors' fencing they have. It will be wood, board on board, and it will go, excuse me, from the far back northwest corner out in front of the trash area. So the whole trash cans also will be hidden from the west side. That pink line is kind of what I wanted the landscaper to visualize, that the whole back half of the property is encased in fencing. Only one of them's mine, but the neighbors have 2 fencing, but there will be evergreens around all the borders. So I'm hopeful that the neighbors see that as a positive, that they're seeing natural landscaping instead of more fencing. And then as we move farther on the west side going south, I am proposing that dense trees that are vertical European hornbeam trees. They're beautiful. I've seen them on walkways. I just visualize with our long parking space that these trees would flank it on the west side, and I think they'd be a very stately looking. If you want evergreens, we can do evergreens, but I think this would be a very cosmetically beautiful site. So this is the plan that you have received in your packet. I know Joe talked about adding another tree in the front on the east side, which we don't have a problem with. Why I stopped the trees on the west side, Joe, what the city wants us to do is have a parking, come in for my property and the one on the west and use the same driveway, and then we would go straight and to the right, and they would go to the left. So there's actually going to be blacktop going in front of that last tree there over to the property on the west. So that's why I stopped that tree at 7. So I think there's plantings of 29 trees. So we're hopeful that, the neighbors like it versus putting fence on fence. I think, we meet the requirements of privacy that the township and the community would want. So the last topic that I felt we needed more discussion on would be the sanitary sewer system. This photo will show you where all the manholes are around our property. So every time I talk to the Delaware Regional Sewer District people, they always directed me to manhole number 14, which is on the corner of Hillmar and Oak Shadow, and that's the larger yellow circle. And then where you see the blue area is where there's 20 feet of utility easement. So once again, it's the only place we can go. Everything else is private property, there's no easements anywhere else. So that's why when this whole discussion of sanitary sewer came up, that's pretty much the only direction we can go. As you can see from the west, that's behind Harris, that's a long way away. Plus, that's all private property, so we'd have to get permission on that. So just kind of clarification of where that manhole is. So basically, there's 3 different ways for us to get sanitary sewer on our property. And this is going to happen whether it's residential or commercial. The property needs sewer. So the first one is an open cut to manhole number 14. I don't think anybody wants it. It means digging 4 to 5 feet down, putting a 6-inch pipe in from our property, through the neighbor's utility area, breaking up sidewalks, going through the street, going on the other side of the sidewalks to the manhole. So it doesn't sound very appealing. I think everyone would agree. So working with the Delaware Regional Sewer System, they have agreed to the final 2 systems. The first one being boring underground. So what we would do is bore from our property and go to the manhole. Typically, they put in an 1.5 to 2-inch pipe over there, and then they put a boot to the sewers, to the manhole for the sewage. So that usually works out well with gravity and with slope, but unfortunately, from our property to that manhole, it's 320 feet. And typically, you don't need any extra help if you're less than 200 feet. So we're going to have to install a grinder pump, some people call it a lift station, in order to force water and sludge or whatever through the pipe to get it to the manhole. So I have had estimates on that and a whole 4-page description of everything they need to do to make that happen. So that obviously is an option, and Joni and I are open to that. You know, it's up for discussion what you guys want to do. The second one is an on-site system. Last time I was in, Joe had recommended to get more information on an on-site system, so we contacted the Delaware General Health District. I had to apply for an application and pay a fee, and they came out and inspected the property on August 20th, a Friday, to make sure the site was fine. In my application, I had to supply a year of water bills from the city of Westerville, where, you know, our business is now. We use about 700 gallons a month, which is less than a residential property, I guess. I had to supply the soil samples that I had Larry Torgnan complete for me in May. Of course, we had to do the plot layout, send them that, so they could see how many parking spaces and how many employees we had. So they reviewed all that, and they did send us a letter of approval that we can put an on-site system, a commercial on-site system on our property. So that was good news. It opens up another avenue for a way to get sanitary sewer to the system. Of course, it's my understanding and I don't know the levels of government, you know, who's in charge, and I think you were talking about that earlier, but they've approved that we can do it. And then on top of that, Kelly, one of the engineers at the Delaware Regional Sewer District, also approved an on-site system. So I think we have 2 good options as far as sanitary sewer, whether it's direct bore with a grinder pump or an on-site system. So that's kind of what I thought were still issues up in the air that we kind of wanted to address, but we would be more than happy to answer any questions or anything. But we thank you. We think J.C. Manny is an excellent business to put into Genoa Township. I think we're a community business. I think we have a lot to offer the community around the location, and we've been in business 26 years. I think we're a positive business in the community, and we look forward to being part of your township. So thank you.
So with some of the things that Joe mentioned through the technical review, do you have any other response to some of those? Are you willing to commit to any of the things that he talked about?
Yeah, I
Clarification on
mean,
any
to
of
be
the
honest, we're
items?
really flexible. I don't know what, it's just like,
Well, you
more
received his-
bushes.
You received his tech review, right, and staff comments? Okay, so there's a number of open ones that still seem to be there. So is there anything that you have a response to at this point or have a
Well,
comment on?
I mean, I read through and highlighted everything. I didn't see anything that we didn't want to do. The extra landscaping, back one. Yep, off the side of the parking lot to the east. He wanted some more bushes. We don't have a problem with that. I think the sanitary sewer, we went over that. Parking, I don't think there's anything there. I will say our landscaping, I did contact our neighbors to the west, the new neighbors, and sent them our landscape plan, and they said it was fine. They had no problem with it. So they're good with it. The sign, I didn't know it had to be turned off at night, so we don't have a problem with that. Between midnight and 6 a.m., I thought it was just the EMC board, but if the whole sign has to go dark, that's not a problem. So I don't see anything that we're in disagreement with, so, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to some other questions here. in a little
Okay.
bit. Mr. Moore?
Just one key question, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. What is your preferred method of sanitation?
Well, for us, we would prefer on-site. I think it's less disruptive to the neighborhood, and we're in control. That's always a good thing for a homeowner. We're not here to aggravate anybody. It was just a great plot of land that we want to put our business on. We're not here to disrupt anything around us. So, that would be number one for us.
Got it, thank you.
During the last meeting, we had public comment, and we closed that, but since there's so many here tonight, I think we'll open it up for any quick comment. One point of contention, though, if you did walk in and you didn't sign the paper in the back, please make sure you sign the paper that you're in. And if you were not here when we swore to tell the truth, make sure you tell me when you walk up here so we can get you to swear in properly. So with that, anybody who would like to come up to the mic and speak?
I was sworn in, by the way. You need my name and address?
Yes, please.
Okay, Clint Byington, 6526 Margaret Drive. I was not at the last meeting, but I did review the entire recording, so I kind of got a little bit of grasp what's going on. I have a question up front. When we give public comment, are we allowed to ask for points of clarification from actually you as a board and including this gentleman here?
Yes.
Okay. My first concern is, first and foremost, I'm against the rezoning of this property, primarily because of the anticipation or the probability or the likelihood of property value being decreased based off of comps. If somebody in one of those particular 4 residences right there on the residential piece going into Northern Lakes attempts to sell their home and they end up having to either lower the price or do something of the sort or can't sell their home, it's going to lower the comps in the entire neighborhood. So that's a primary concern of mine. Simply because if I walked out on my back deck in one of those 4 homes, the last thing I want to see is basically an asphalt parking lot or a resident or a commercial building for that matter. It would almost deter me from buying a house in one of those areas. In conjunction with that, if that piece of property, 169, is in fact switched over to commercial from residential, you essentially sandwich a residential piece of property in between 2 commercial pieces of land. When you do that, you effectively give the interpretation or the look and feel of spot zoning. And once that's done, it's almost a guarantee that that middle piece of property that's sandwiched in there is going to become commercial, which is going to like that entire thing. Now, I understand what maybe the commission said years ago, or whatever the case is, but we live in that neighborhood, okay? We pay the taxes, we pay a lot for our property. The last thing I want to see happen is my property going down in value simply because we allowed a commercial business to enter in there. Now, I do have a couple, I went through all the documents the best I could and understood them the best that I could. So the vegetation on the southern portion of the south driveway, or the parking lot, what I understood is it's eucalyptus grass that's being planted in there as a screening of the parking lot itself. If that is the case, my question is this. According to the zoning resolution, any screening vegetation, any screening whatsoever has to be a minimum of 5.5 feet high. Eucalyptus grass only grows to 48 inches, okay, and it dies in the wintertime. So it's not a screening effect at all. So my question is that what's anticipated to go in there? And if it is, it's not, eucalyptus grass is not one, or ornamental grass, is it's in two different documents, is not one of the zoning resolution listed methods of using for screening. So my question is that going to remain that way, or does it now need to be changed?
Want to answer that?
The citation of the code is correct. What is proposed, I would agree, is not compliant, which is why I talked about the 5.5 foot height of that landscaping screening. And he's correct, they would have to be evergreen, or a fence, or like a wall to satisfy, or a mound, I should say, to satisfy the 5.5 feet in height to satisfy that code section. So I think that's one of the things the commission will have to discuss.
You answered, actually, a couple of my questions got answered during the proceedings when you started. So I just have one more. As I was listening to the recording from the last meeting, a comment was made that if not commercial, then what? And it was kind of a reference to we don't want to put the board in a position to having to consider what goes on that piece of land. The comment was also made that the board doesn't have any control over real estate transactions. Those two things, in my opinion, contradict each other. I don't think the board has any business determining what goes in there and what doesn't. So I'm not real sure why that statement was made other than a point of clarification, which is what I got out of the recording. Personally, it's residential. It was zoned that way for a reason. I think it needs to stay that way. You can also put a house on there. Okay, you can put if I was going to walk out of my backyard and look across that on one of those 4 properties right there, I'd rather see a house there than a business sitting there with parking lots. My opinion, I'm not going to speak for anybody that owns those 4 houses because I don't. The other thing that is if you sandwich that residential piece of property in between those 2 commercial pieces of property, assuming that this gets changed to commercial, you now have affected over twice as many homes as there are bordering lot 169. So now you've not only affected 4, you've affected over twice as many homes because now they're going to go commercial all the way around the back side of that lot. So again, from my take, I'm against the rezoning of this for the reasons that are stated. And thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Steve. Anybody else? Please come up, yep. Name, address?
Pamela Schneider. I'm actually just moved in recently.
Okay.
And I apologize, I got lost. And then I have trouble here and I was trying to read lips at the side, which makes it really hard. I guess I just have a few things.
Your
Address?
Oh,
Where do you live?
6529 Margaret Drive, Westville, Ohio. You know the zip. Okay. I feel kind of bad because I'm jumping in this at the last minute. But when I heard about this meeting and knowing that we just spent, with my fiance, we just spent a pretty penny to get in the neighborhood. And the first thing I heard was they can hear the trucks start up in the morning. And then it was scary when I heard that there was such a huge gas tank that, from the asphalt, which had nothing to do with you. But the thing is, those decisions were made in the past, but also now we want to add another business. And I'm just concerned about that. And I'm just concerned about that. I need to learn more about that. But also, I just done a quick search, and I don't know what, the Better Business Bureau, they didn't have any, your business wasn't registered. I didn't know if that was a decision somebody could make and just didn't want to pay the fees. Again, I just did a quick search. And also the landscape sounds beautiful, what you have in mind, but it's going to take so long, you know, because it's going to grow, and it usually takes a long time for all that stuff to grow. And so therefore, you guys have done such an excellent job in keeping that neighborhood up. And that's why we pay the premium prices to get in. And I just hope that we can keep it worth, because I plan on retiring and not moving any place else. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Barhorst. I live at 6529 Margaret Drive with Pamela. To reiterate Clint's point, I see that the new property would sandwich a residential piece of property, and that residential piece of property goes quite deep. And it's probably just a matter of time before that sandwich property also becomes commercial, and it's more impact upon that neighborhood behind it. The other thing is, I'd like to look at the overall traffic showing Maxtown and Hillmar Drive. If we could bring that up, please. Bring up the intersection. And you could bring it up on the plans, or in fact, it would be preferable to bring it up on the J.C. Manny plan so we could see the location of the drive. My concern is the traffic pattern at that intersection.
Is there a specific plan drawing you can reference for Mr. Benson?
There's a plan view showing the intersection and
Yeah.
the building.
2 of 3 on
2 of 3?
this project,
There's a color picture on 3 of 3 on the,
Yeah.
Which is the very first slide.
What? Yeah, what's your black and white site plan showing the driveway location? It's a drawing. There it is, right there. What drawing is that, sir?
Sheet 2 of 3, Paul. in the site plan. He's looking for it, because the labels on the PDFs don't match the labels on the drawings, so it's hard for us to sometimes know what is what when we look at these files. That's one.
Thank you. So what's the distance of that driveway to the, to Hillmar, please, approximately? Could you estimate that? It's about double the width of that residential lot, so.
My rough estimate is probably only ballpark 200 feet
Okay, all right.
what did you guess?
from the eastern.
What's the lot depth there? Are those 150s, or
They're citing the width of the J.C. Manning lot as 150. So if I just sort of take my fingers and then move it to the, measure that, and then move it
okay.
to the east side of that driveway, that's,
All
there's
right.
still some length, so it's probably, 200. Paul's gonna try to.
Okay,
briefly measure
150
it.
to 200 feet.
Depends on where you measure. If you're measuring center line, it's more than 200.
Right. So my point that I'm getting to is,
270.
traffic coming from Hoover Reservoir, traveling west to that intersection in the morning, different times of day, there's a constant stream of traffic, and we wait for the light to turn onto Maxtown Road. So what's going to happen is that when the light changes and cars are trying to exit the subdivision onto Maxtown, now there's going to be, I don't know if we're thinking about installing a center turn lane or if there's one there, I can't recall. There's going to be cars that are going to want to turn into the apparel company, causing a conflict in that area. So I think that having a commercial property this close to the entrance to the subdivision poses a hazard to the residents of the subdivision. And I don't think that that hazard is, warranted. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Can I ask Joe a question?
Yeah.
Does the city of Westerville control the driveway placement?
Yes. As well as that section of Maxtown Road and then the light.
Do we, and I'm gonna refer to Mr. Leff as the engineer, what are those concrete barriers that keep you from turning left? What are those? We talked about it with the church.
Oh, the Jersey barriers?
No.
Oh,
Islands?
Yeah.
You want about the island or the peninsula thingies?
Yeah, the peninsula. Is that something that we could stipulate?
I don't think so.
Not on a center turn lane.
Westerville is,
No, I mean, coming out of this property, if we were to grant the rezoning, could we require a prohibition on turning left out of the property or
I
east?
think
No.
after our discussions with from the school edition, we learned that we can't do that.
Okay.
and I wouldn't want the commission to make the public a promise that we really can't uphold.
We can't.
Well, that's why I ask if we have jurisdiction. Okay.
No, Westerville's gonna do, there is like a center lane there because it begins the left turn lane to make the left end of Hillmar. I don't know whether or not they would convert it into a left turn lane to turn left into the site. You can see the taper starts. The lane is still there, but the taper actually to go into the lane begins. But I don't know ultimately.
Center turn at that point.
Yeah, but I'm assuming you can do that movement already based on what I'm seeing on the striping on the GIS site, but
Right.
I just can't speak for Westerville whether they're gonna make any further alterations to that design.
All right, anybody else? Going once? One more.
Hello, Sarah Hurd. I live at 7166 Hillmar Drive, would be the property where the sewer would be going under, getting bored under. A couple questions, like I said last time, it would decrease the value of the property 100%. And how tall is this building going to be?
22 feet.
Okay, so it's going to be way higher than the trees that are being put in. You can drive by the property now, like I stated last time. It hasn't been, the grass or landscape is not kept up. It hasn't been kept up since the last 2 years that I lived there. So I mean, it's a lot easy to cut an empty field now, so the landscapers, I'm assuming, I don't know if it's the same ones, probably are going to do the same thing. And how deep can you bore under something? Because there's a French drain underneath there, and it's very, very deep. So I don't know how deep they're going to bore underneath there. And then also I'm going to have to check into, there's an easement, but the easement is for the city, not for another person to use that easement. And I'm going to have to look more into that because my understanding is it's for utilities like the cable, the city, the county, not for another person to use that easement. And then if there's a septic tanks can be dangerous, give off gas, give off fumes. So how healthy is that for us? My little kids play in the backyard all the time next to the neighbor's little kids. Balls go over there. We're going to be going over there all the time. And also the trees that she wants to put up, if there's a storm right now and a tree falls down, it's active nature. So who's responsible for all those trees if they fall on my fence, if they fall on my house? Because those are more trees that she's adding that is not there now. You want to say anything? That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? All right. You haven't sworn in? Right. You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is David Hill. I reside at 7180 Hillmar Drive. My wife and I were against the changing of the zoning issue because we figured back when the engineers looked at this before, they seen something and they just probably say, well, let's just leave it like it is, residential. So we just kind of hate to see it change. We're going to miss the backyard look of the grounds, nature, but we don't have anything against the business, but we just don't want to see the zoning changes to business. And there's something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember what that was, so we'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
It's still just property to the north, 7156 Hillmar. I remember there was mention of it last time that the property to the west, that this being rezoned was contingent on possibly that being rezoned. Is there been any mention or talk to that?
No.
That this would be a sandwich commercial inside of residential?
We've got no application from the property owner to the west.
Currently for that property.
You have talked to them about septic in that small amount of space. Has this been run through actual engineering calcs, or is this just a letter from?
Well, it's from their engineers at the Delaware County Regional Office. Kelly Thorne is a staff engineer number 3 for the Delaware County Regional Sewer District. So I did speak to engineers within the regional sewer district.
And I still have some reservation about your retention pond and the location of the existing pine trees. It's overlapping. That retention pond's gonna be far too close and kill pretty much every tree on the eastern side. You may want to relook at that.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Scott Daly, 7064 Hillmar Drive. I've not been sworn in yet.
You promise to tell the whole truth, nothing?
I do. Yes.
The whole truth, nothing but the truth, and so help you God. Thank you.
Yes. So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I don't have to repeat all of that.
Good.
My concern is not necessarily what's going to happen right now, but maybe 10 years from now or 20 years from now, once you open the can of worms for making it commercial, if, heaven forbid, the company would go out of business, what happens to the next one that goes in there? Are they bound by the same rules as all the landscaping rules and everything that goes on?
The property is zoned and has a development plan for that property. It's not dependent upon the.
And that remains the same throughout the life of the property? They can't move trees, they can't move?
The final development plan, when it's issued, is the final development plan for that property. If they wanted to make a change, they'd have to come back in front of this commission and request a change.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Matt?
I just have a quick question. There's a beautiful white house in the back. Like when you walk by, when you drive by, there's a beautiful white, it seems like a house, private property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Poor people. I mean, they'll be surrounded by businesses, but, okay, thank you.
Hang on, you already went. Anybody else? You, real quick.
So also, she mentioned last time about it was in her daughter's backyard, that's why they wanted to build it. I wanted to know which house was her daughter's backyard, since I know where the other houses or the backyard is. The other one is 2 places down, there's already a lot for sale. It's already zoned commercial, why wouldn't you buy that? And then also last time she said there was only 5 employees, but then another time there was up to 8. And I drove by there last time coming to the meeting, and there was a for sale sign for a full-time customer service. Well, now if you go back there again, there is now another sign for a part-time customer service. So like, are we still 5 employees? Are we gonna be 8 with another full-time customer service that the sign was? Or now another part-time, so 9.5 people? don't understand when it goes from 5 to 8 to now I seen a full-time and then a part-time. So there's just a lot of not clear-coded things that have been said. Thank you.
All right, at this point, we're going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission. Anybody want to start?
Joe, I have a quick question. When the township had established that they were looking for this to ultimately become commercial, what year was that?
The first mentions of it were in the 99 plan, which I imagine would have begun preparation probably in 98, I would imagine. The first verbiage that most closely mirrors the current verbiage was from 2008. I should reference that basically there was no updates to the plan between 99 and 2008. None that were at least
99
adopted.
it was mentioned, and
Yeah,
in 2008,
99
it wrote it out.
99 basically said it didn't make a lot of sense for residential to proliferate in this designated planning area because of the existing development character in Maxtown Road, and I'm sure all the traffic. And I'm making a little bit of assumption there, but basically that further residential in this area didn't make sense. And then 2008 is where the recommendation pops up that this, if this were to change, that this should be commercial.
Okay, thank you.
And there was no plans, no updates to the comp plan adopted between 99 and 2008. There were attempts, but nothing approved.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, question. What is the business on, denoted as number 8, directly across from the subject property?
Let me get out the drawing here real quick.
It notes Sonova Realty LLC, but I think it's just a holding company for it.
Oh, is that the old pretty metal?
It's Sonova.
Yes, they do, I don't know specifically what they do, but Sonova is the business there.
They're a
Process
part-
waste
They're a part
oil.
of Bundy.
Is that what they-
Bundy Baking, and they make the different baking sheets. and
Gotcha.
They're making different stuff. It was,
Process waste oil.
and they do the oil in that one.
Yeah.
And then it's not developed on that area, but another self-storage business is just to the west of Sonova.
Cardinal?
Yes,
put the
Cardinal.
new spot
Yep.
in there.
Pardon me, yeah, is the next one.
But that, the building across the street's been Purdy Metals, it was
Yes.
Worthington Industries, and now it's Sonova.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you got anything? Want to talk about? I can go.
Go ahead. I'm still flip-flopping on the septic versus
Okay.
sewer.
All right, so from a landscape perspective, we talked about the fencing. We're only gonna fence part of it. We're gonna add the additional trees. Joe, this is really more a question for you. Is there wording that we need to put in there about the preservation of trees? I know that's come up in conversation before, but is there something specific about preservation of trees or preservation of shielding if a tree falls? Is there something that we need to put in specifically?
Typically, the verbiage we put in is at final, where there's a standard about dead and dying trees shall be replaced by the subsequent planting season. That's a detail we usually don't cover at this juncture.
Okay, but that would be in final, we'd ask for
It's
that.
something I would ask for in writing, the document as part of the final development plans. In fact, if I don't have a comment from that tech review saying that I will be expecting that at final, I should.
That makes sense. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I do, though, because that's pretty standard.
Now, this is more final, but you did throw in the picture of a couple lights and wall sconce and whatnot.
I didn't want to be talking forever, but
fine.
I did have some lights up. That is what we're proposing, but once again, this is early in the system, but the back northwest corner would have a direct light going down on the door. The front of the building would just have porch lights and maybe can lights in the porch.
So I'll just point you to the lighting standard and be very
Okay.
careful about what you've got, because most of everything that we've got in there is downlight, and it's not broadcasting outward. So
Right.
we're gonna wanna look at where that's gonna go on the building. If you're gonna have anything that goes outward,
Oh.
that's gonna be a potential issue.
Okay, okay.
So make sure we're looking at that. If you are told by the fire marshal that the door has to be put on the side of the building, that's gonna require a light over the top of the door.
Right, right,
And a landing.
right.
Okay.
Right.
Just-
Yes, I agree.
Okay. because of the production, and we talked about last time shifts in operation and whatnot, and Joe brought up a good point, if the parking lot's being used after hours in dark, especially in the winter, there's gonna have to be some lighting.
Right.
Have you given any other consideration to that?
You know, I'm kind of trying to be a good person, and I don't know what the neighbors want and what you guys want. We will do whatever. If you guys want lights, parking lights, we'll put lights in the parking lot. We work 9 to 5, but I do agree, at 5 o'clock, it's dark in the winter. So we will be more than happy to put parking lot lights in there to code. So we're not opposed to it. You know, I was trying to have the least amount of lighting that we could put in there.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. The code doesn't necessarily say that they have to be standalone lights specifically for the purposes of lighting the parking lot. It just says the parking lot has to be lit. So if there's building-mounted lighting which illuminates what we feel is a comfortable amount of parking, the commission could determine that that satisfies the requirement. We've seen that done in some instances in the past, especially in these more sensitive scenarios where no one's really crazy about seeing standalone parking lot lights. It's more expensive for the applicant, and it's, you know, no one really wants to see them anyway. So I'm just throwing that out there as an option. You don't necessarily have to put up standalone posts to meet the code requirement.
Okay, yeah.
I think the bollard lights were an option for some people, where, you know, it's low-level lighting, it's not overhead.
What's the name of that again?
Like a bollard, a pipe bollard, you know what a bollard?
Oh,
the
okay,
post light
yes, yes.
in front of the parking lot and right in front of
Okay.
the parking spots, and that would be lighting, so.
Just
it
to
has be
Mr.
lit.
Left's point, whatever you do, you want to make sure it meets the design specification. Now, again, usually, we don't really get into the nitty-gritty of the design of these lights until the final application. At this stage, I'd be happy to, if the applicant just says, we agree that the parking lot will be lit to satisfy code requirements in some manner.
Agree the
That's
parking
all
lot
I'm
will be
looking for at this point.
I have a question.
Uh-huh,
The number of employees keep
right,
becoming a concern to the
Right.
neighbors, because I think everyone's worried about
right.
traffic.
Right. So, we did hire someone who was going to work 30 hours to us, that's full-time right now, because we're open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 4. And a week before she was going to start, she decided not to keep her regular job because they were going to move in a year and she didn't want to change jobs. So it's not that this is a second person we're hiring, it's the same person. And I think you can ask anyone, finding people right now is a bear. So we decided, instead of maybe saying the word full-time, that was scaring people off because it's really not full-time, it's not 40 hours, that we'd put the sign to say part-time, and maybe we'd get more applicants in, but it's the same position. Unfortunately, the person we did hire decided to stay at a regular job because they were moving in a year. So it's,
So
so,
currently, you're running at how many employees?
8,
Including yourselves?
right, right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I will
And
note my
this is our,
office.
I'm sorry, can I?
Oh, yeah,
say
go
one
ahead.
thing? This is our busy time of year, August and September, because we're back to school. I mean, that will go down, and that's why when you keep hearing numbers, you know, we keep our payroll to what it needs to be. So it will go down to maybe 6, you know, in the winter and stuff like that. So I go to Florida in the winter, so I'm one less person, so, you know, so.
Just point of clarification on both number of employees and hours. That's not something from an enforcement standpoint we're probably going to get involved with, so.
I'm just looking
Oh.
at lights at night.
No,
coming in-
that
coming in
makes
and out at
sense.
5 o'clock, like if you've got 8 employees leaving versus 28 employees leaving.
And I
how
didn't
much
mean you
lighting?
can't discuss it. I just wanted to make it sure everyone, we were all on the same page that.
Yeah,
In
our
fact,
pro-
probably at
Not trying to
final,
be a restraint of trade, just trying to look at traffic lights.
probably my recommendation will be at final is I'll go through and look at language, and if I see stuff that makes it look like we're supposed to enforce it, and I know we're not going to be able to enforce it, I'll tell them to make sure they revise the verbiage to
I
make
think the
it
number of
flex.
cars going in and out was and lights hitting houses.
Yes, that is definitely
A
warranted,
concern.
so.
Yeah, and as far as the traffic in and out, I think I said last time, our employees, the production people leave at 3, the embroiderer leaves at 4, Joni leaves at 5, I leave somewhere between 3 and 5. So it's not like the whole business shuts down and 8 people drives out of the parking lot. That we're kind of in shifts, you know. I hire a lot of moms, and they work during the school hours of 9 to 3, and then they leave. My embroiderer doesn't have any kids, so or she has grown-up kids, so she stays at 4. So it's hit and miss all day, you know, as far as it's not 8 people going out the driveway at the same time, so.
Joe, between the tech review and the staff commentary, how many open items are there still that we need clarification on?
Bear with me, I can jump through them real quick. We need the calculations regarding impervious surface lot coverage need to be corrected or utilize the post-annexation acreage. We have that the parking lot must be lit in some manner, which we just discussed. We get into the additional tree that I believe is going to be required on the eastern side, along the eastern side lot line. I'm going to rescind my belief that a tree needs to be provided on the western side for compliance purposes, because I think the applicant pointed out a very important point that I didn't take into consideration, was the possibility that Westerville is going to make them connect that driveway to the west. So I think since they're essentially land banking that, I think it makes sense not to put the tree there, and I think we can make an argument that it's not a compliance concern at that point because they can't put it there. So I don't think they should be penalized for that. We need clarification whether a divergence to section 120405, whether a divergence to that section is actually being required.
Explain that one a little bit more, just getting into that a little bit. That was a separate question I had, but I want to, since you
Yeah,
brought it up.
let me go see, I think we have a zoning code back here for reference real quick.
I got mine.
I got one. My apologies.
We're going to 1205?
1204.05. So I only bring this up because the response the applicant gave us in the development text says they're requesting a divergence for this standard. But no such divergence is actually in the divergence list, nor is there any information pertaining to it. So just for the sake of reference, section 1204.05 reads, and apologies, I'll get there momentarily. Where the lot lines separate this district from residential or plain residential district, a visual and a mechanical barrier, a minimum of 5 1/2 feet in height, shall be provided along common lot lines. I think what we're essentially seeing is what they're proposing complies with this, or they've already asked a divergence for some of those standards relative to this. So if they wish to incorporate,
Was not a divergence in the original plan from Sandsdecker.
there's a request relative to, and it gets confusing because the code talks about these buffers in a few different places and sometimes they overlap. So that's where some of the confusion comes in. Because there's a divergence request relative to sections 120303 in its entirety that has to deal with the 75-foot green strip buffer and having it being planted to provide a buffer. So 120405 is essentially a very similar requirement to 120303. So I guess we need either clarification from the applicant whether or not they wish to amend divergence request number 2 to also cite 120405, or whether they're agreeing that they're going to comply with section 120405 contingent upon the granting of the already asked for divergence. I know that's super complicated, but that's the situation in which we find ourselves in.
So we're looking at the revised text. In
Yes.
120405, it says divergence is requested from this section of code, but on the requested divergence.
There is no such
section,
divergence.
There is nothing there.
So we just need clarification on what exactly is being the response for that
Do you
section.
have a reasonable response to that?
I'm kind of lost here, so
Okay.
can I see the paperwork and stuff that you're
So on
referring
your
to?
revised text that you had,
Okay.
right?
Let me see.
Your preliminary plan text. With the revisions.
Last page.
I can provide you a copy.
Oh, okay.
On page 6 of 6, in your revised text in 120405, divergence is requested from this section of code. Requested divergences, you've asked for 4,
Right?
and none of them apply to that 120405 section.
So is the 120405 a landscape question? What is?
Yeah, so that's what Joe just read from here. So 120405, where the lot lines separate this district from a residential or planned residential district, a visual or and mechanical barrier, a minimum of 5 1/2 feet in height, shall be provided along the common lot line. So that
Okay.
whole western side.
Western
because,
side.
Right, we're referring to the western side there.
Yes.
And we,
Because it is considered RR right now,
right,
and
and,
you want to change it, so there would be an entire barrier there.
right, so we have a 6-foot fence halfway up, and then we have trees that are gonna be taller than 5.5 feet.
So you're not asking for the divergence because you have put this in place. Okay, so the
Right.
text in here is not
Okay.
correct.
That was my analysis as well, but I couldn't come.
Should have the word not in there probably.
So divergence is not requested. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay. That clarifies that. All right, Joe, sorry, that was a sidebar. Is there anything else that is not yet on your list?
Moving on, sorry, just looking real quick. Some of it's redundant, so I don't want to read through it again. Regarding the setbacks, there's some still incorrectly cited setbacks that need to be corrected in the general information table on sheet 1 and in the setback keynotes on sheet 1, as well as on the illustrative drawing on sheet 1, and this is relative to the correct measurements as it pertains to the 75-foot, 25-foot setbacks mentioned in section 120309C. They're citing that there's a 25-foot setback requirement, but it's actually a 75-foot because they're against residential property. So they need to change the citation of what the requirement is from that 25 to that 75. So that's, again, more of a housekeeping item than it is an actual compliance concern.
Cleaning up the text.
The discussion about the front parking lot screening that was brought up during public comment, what is proposed is not compliant. It needs to either be a fence, a mound, or evergreen plantings, and they have to be 5.5 feet tall. So either the plan needs to be revised to a compliant status, or a divergence would have to be granted, assuming if the commission was agreeable with the proposal, noting the testimony that the public gave on concerns about that matter.
I think Paul's indicating where that is on the screen there. So you're saying that has to be 5 foot high, so from the road? Off of Maxtown?
That's what the code says.
Well, Harris has little wood, boxwoods and stuff there, so.
Yeah, I don't know how that came about for Harris. I can only say this is what the code that's currently in place now says. So I can't opine on whether I think it's a good idea or not. All I can say is that's what the code requires.
Okay.
So you're gonna comply with that? And change the landscape plan, or you wanna ask for a divergence?
Divergence.
We ask for a divergence, because you can't see our building if it's 5 feet high from the road.
What about the additional comment on the east side of that for the headlights?
I don't have a problem with that.
And
And
that's
that
not a
can be
code
fine.
requirement. That's
Right.
just
That
a
was a recommendation.
recommendation.
But I just wanna make sure I'm recording.
Correct.
the record.
On that side, I don't mind having a 5-foot barrier up, you know. It's just more cosmetically, when you look at the building, you're not gonna be able to see it. And I don't think anybody has 5 foot up on all of Maxtown.
I would make a comment to be cognizant of your driveway,
Mhm.
cars going in and out, and any safety concern that could arise with that type of screenage.
And Mr. Chairman, for the record, that's a requirement of section 1203.09B, which refers to section 2003.03 of the code. So there's two different code sections. So if you're talking about a divergence, those are the code sections that would need to be referenced.
120309B?
So it's a requirement of section 2003.03 of the code via section 120309B. Because 120309B essentially points to another section of the code and says you have to comply with this.
So question, Joe, based on that divergence, we already have a finding that you've made that they need to reduce the 75-foot parking, which that is 1203.09. Does this have any bearing on that as well? Page 3 of your notes.
No, the one's a setback requirement restriction, the other's a landscaping screening requirement. So they're related to the parking lot and its relationship to the road, but in different manners.
We're going to refer to 2003.02 then?
That's kind of my question.
I would say it's a divergent to section 2003.03 via section 120309B. That way, there's absolutely no question as to whether or not we forgot a section.
Got it.
I know it's convoluted. Continuing on the list, I do think in order to be able to demonstrate compliance with 120102, I think it'd be in the best interest, and I imagine the board's going to want to know what route is being taken in regards to sanitary or septic. And I don't think, again, we're going to have to shy away from conditions, so it can't be a rezoning conditional upon the applicant doing this. So if a motion's made this evening, I think you're going to want to probably revise some of the draft I have in there, noting it's the plans, you're reviewing the plans received on the date we cited in the exhibit list with the following revisions agreed to by the applicant this evening, which are as followed. So you're not making them conditions, you're just codifying the revisions the applicant has agreed to verbally in your meeting, if you go down that path. Sorry, I want to go through the rest. I'm sorry, Ms. Walsh.
And that was that's the sixth one I have down. Are you?
I'm going to go through just to make sure I didn't miss anything else.
Sixth divergence or sixth item?
Sixth one that needs to be, that he's just brought up recently.
Yeah.
There was again, a housekeeping item. The response to item E under section 270703 was accidentally omitted. There's no response to that section. We need a response to that section. It has to do with the divergence review and how you're evaluating each divergence request. 270703E, which reads, specific list of divergences being requested, if any. Oh, this is where they have to itemize. I'm sorry, I must have trying to do this on the fly, so it's a little hard to keep track of all of it. So 270703E is the section that says you have to respond to all of the divergence review criteria that the code sets out. So that criteria actually is over in 270705. So if you look at the development text, they went through 270705 on page, I believe it's 4. And you can see they put down the text, the orderly development of all lands within the township to its appropriate use, but they did not provide you a response in bold. You can see if you look at B, C, D, F, they responded to each of those with no adverse impact, but they didn't provide a response to E. So ideally, we'd have a response to E, so we know how they feel about that particular issue. I imagine based on what was written, it's probably gonna be no adverse impact, since that's what was written for pretty much all the rest, but again, I can't do that for them. I've already talked about the front setback, needs to reflect the annexation, so that's already on our list. The divergence for section 120801, again, states that the front building setback is 79 feet. That's incorrect because it doesn't take the 10-foot annexation into account. The verbiage needs to be revised on sheet 1 and in the development text to note it's actually a 69-foot proposed setback. Again, that's a housekeeping item, but we need to make sure all the materials are accurate. We don't have a conceptual sign lighting plan. We've seen some specific designs, but we don't have a conceptual plan of where those fixtures actually would be on the building or generally where they would illuminate. We've talked about some of that already this evening. I believe that is it.
Can we address the septic?
Let's talk about
sewer?
septic.
All right. I'm not a fan of the septic system idea. I think the direction of boring to the manhole would be the better solution. Only because, well, for many different reasons, but number one, as one of the neighbors mentioned, the odor from a septic system. I mean, I live out on the other side of the township where there is septic, and I'm used to it. I grew up with it. It didn't bother me any. But occasionally there are odors, especially when there's a heavy rainfall and if the tank fills up with water and the leach system can't keep up. But I also have concern with the fact that you're going to have a retention pond there on the property, and how are those two systems possibly going to interplay or intersect? Now, I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for the health and welfare of everybody involved, especially the neighbors, pumping that sludge off-site into the septic, into the sewer system, long-term is a far better solution than having to deal with it in a leach field. But that's just based on my experience with the septic system. Especially if the engineers believe that you can bore underneath the street, bore through the right-of-way, so you're not really disturbing anything other than once you reach the manhole, and obviously there's got to be some digging and whatnot to tie into the system, but I think that's, for the long term, probably the least disruptive option. That's my 2 cents.
Chip, to your point earlier, don't disagree, but I think you brought it up. Is it our position or authority to make that decision if the county has approved both methods, which apparently they have at this juncture?
I can't imagine, I mean, I don't want to speak for the county, but I can't imagine the county saying, no, you can't tie in to the sanitary sewer system. And you have to put in a septic system.
They didn't say that.
But no, that's my point. I can't imagine the county would say, you have to put in a septic system.
No, and that's my point, that they've approved both methods.
Right.
Yeah.
But to Joe's point, I mean, and I'm not gonna put words in your mouth, but you said that could be ultimately one of the amendments that are documented here tonight.
That's under what, 120102?
Yeah, so that's basically the section that says this section is being designed for lot serviced by, and I'm paraphrasing again, public sanitary or another sewage treatment system approved as part of the development plan. That's essentially what it says. So I think what the commission needs, and I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but this is my read of it, is you may want to just think about, are you comfortable voting on a plan whose proposal regarding septic or sewer seems to be undecided? They've demonstrated that both can work, but they haven't said this is what we're proposing to you specifically.
That's not true. I asked a question earlier, and
Well, they told you their preference, but I don't know if that constitutes a binding, this is our 100% our proposal. Usually we get an application that says, this is what I'm doing.
the declinate, like many of the things we're discussing tonight, that's not.
And I'm not saying you can't pass it with it, that being an open-ended item. I just think you need to determine whether you're comfortable doing that or not, and just understand that you may be comfortable with that, but it's just so everyone in even the applicant understands, the trustees may not be comfortable with that. But that's the risk of this whole process.
So I understand where you're coming from, and once again, I guess at this stage, since this is the first zoning meeting, I believe, of a couple, I think all we had to do was present an option that sewer can get, sanitary sewer is available to the property, so I guess that's where we came in. We didn't come in with, what's our decision? To your point about the boring, the bids I got were like 4 pages long with tons of disclaimer of them. If they hit rock and anything, they might have to come from the top and go down and fix stuff, and you know how it is. They have a million disclaimers. So I guess from Joni and I's standpoint, we felt more comfortable with the on-site system just because there's a little bit more control in our hands. When we bore under, we don't know what we're running into. And, you know, there's septic already on the property to our west, and no one's ever complained about odor or anything in the neighborhood. So there is septic already, I believe, in the area. So, you know, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying both systems have pluses and minuses to them, I guess. So we're just trying to be neighbor-friendly at this stage. So, you know, if you guys don't want us to have an on-site system, we're bored, you
If I
know.
may add, I mean, but
So-
I guess the question begs to be asked, which system are you proposing that you want to put in?
On-site.
So just to be
No more
clear, that's what you're asking,
conjecture,
is that what you're asking the commission to vote on this evening?
I'm asking them that we have sewer options, and that is a sewer option that we would prefer.
So your answer is yes?
Yes.
You want us to vote on, you're going to have a septic system in your proposal for the project?
I guess I'm confused when I spoke to my engineer who put this together. He said at this stage, we don't have to make that decision, so I can't say, I mean, you know, we haven't even had a on-site system designer do it yet, so I don't even know what it looks like. I mean, all we did was go through the initial steps, that approvals, so I could come in and feel comfortable that at least the Delaware Regional Sewer District does approve, the Delaware General Health District does approve for an on-site system. You know, I was told I just need to tell you I can get sewer, just like I told you I could get utilities like gas and electric and all that, you know,
So
so.
she's demonstrated that the site can be serviced in some way, that the sewer's gonna have somewhere to go, whether it's a septic system or via the public sanitary system, the sewer. So I think that's really, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but am I correct in
Yeah.
summarizing that?
Yeah.
So
We
again, it
can't
just,
really opine on it this evening. based
no,
on
it's just up to the
sewer use.
commission whether or not, you know, you'll have, when you cast your vote, if that's the scenario where we're in an either-or situation, you'll have to just take that in consideration, but
But,
I can't tell you one way or the other which way to go on that.
but Joe, if someone built a house there
Mm-hmm.
and they were making the determination and they go to Delaware County, these would be the same options, most likely, depending on the size of the house and the number of occupants based on the size that they're building the house, that they would be providing to them.
Yes.
So regardless of whether this is a commercial or a residential end use, these are still the options.
Correct. So if you're comfortable with the fact that they've demonstrated that service can be provided to the site one way or the other, then maybe it's a moot point. If you want to hear something, a specific ironclad proposal, that's another thing. I don't think that's absolutely necessary based on my reading of the verbiage. I think they do just need to demonstrate that it can be provided, because that's the primary concern. You know, where's your sewer gonna go, your waste gonna go? Ideally, it's, no pun intended, flushed out at this point, but, you know, this is a unique situation, though. We don't normally see lots in this situation.
I was slow on the uptake on that one.
All right, anything else to discuss at this point? Chip, you got anything else?
I don't know that a residential septic system would, because you said you only use 700 gallons of water a month.
700 gallons, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that for a residential lot that you would get septic approval, because if you consider 4 or 5 people living there, laundry, et cetera, I'm not a sanitation engineer, and I'm not gonna even pretend to be one, but so be it.
Good. All right, we got a divergence review to do. Chip, you want to do it again? Well, before we do that, knowing we've got, what do we say, 9?
Yeah.
9 items that we have to list out very specifically. Do you want to move forward with voting at this point? Do you want to continue and clean it all up and give us a clean copy? What do you-
It sounds like, you know, I didn't know there was that many. I thought it was 4 or 5. So, yeah, we'll clean it up and come back next month. We don't have a problem with that, if that's what you're asking.
That
So-
would make everybody's lives a lot easier
Okay.
versus reading off 9
Okay.
items
Okay.
that say this is what you're going to do.
Okay,
And wordsmithing it on the
And-
fly.
and then-
okay.
Yeah.
So do we type up those and Smith Decker
Go
would
back
do that?
through
Okay,
Development text,
Okay.
modify all the
Okay.
stuff that we had,
Okay.
everything that Joe said needs to
Okay.
get cleaned up, what you're committing to, what you're not
Okay.
committing to. There's now a 5th divergence that you need to put in here
okay,
and call for that divergence,
Okay.
referencing back out to the standards.
okay.
Do you have the list of 9? Do you
Yeah.
understand? Okay. I would highly recommend that you talk to
Right.
them before.
Yeah, I
and
am
then-
more than happy to go through all
Right.
of that with
Okay.
you. I think your consultant probably will have a pretty good understanding of it, but
Yeah.
if there's any questions of Joe, what exactly are you looking for? More than happy to have those
Okay.
conversations.
My personal preference is that once you get above 4 of these things,
Right.
it's difficult because
Right.
now we're
I
talking
can
about a lot
appreciate
of
that.
stuff
Sure.
versus you having it done in text. We always like to
Absolutely.
give clean copies to the board.
Okay.
To the trustees.
Okay,
So
okay.
if you're good
Sounds
with the
good.
continuance, then that would be even better.
We are.
So we need,
Would be a week from today, which is the 20th. However, the commission does have the authority to set whatever date you want it to be. So I don't know if the applicant feels like that's enough time, or if they want a little more time. Just know the later we get it, the less time you have it to review, the less time I have to review, the less time the public has to review.
It's really my engineers, you know, when they can have the time to put it together. I don't know what their schedule's like. So, you know, is it customary to do a week or?
That's always our default. I don't know.
Can we,
what do you need from turnaround right now? I mean, you
Let's
gotta,
see, the next meeting would be October 12th, which is a Tuesday, not a Monday, because we're closed for Columbus Day. So
oh, okay,
So keep that in mind. I mean, I only probably need a week. Just know that if you do that, you're not gonna get my report until like the Friday before, possibly even that Monday morning. But if you wanna give them more time to try to get it cleaned up in hopes that you can finally make a motion at the next meeting, maybe more time is warranted, or maybe we meet somewhere in the middle, I don't know.
the end of next week?
to have it back to you,
To read all your materials resubmitted.
Because we don't have to re-advertise as long as we continue to a date, time, place, and certain on the record here.
24th would be okay for you then?
Yeah, I can make that work.
Okay, so Friday would be due by the Friday the 24th.
Especially because the number of things I'm looking at now are relatively minor. I'm not having to review the
I know,
whole
it's
thing. I'm
not
just
a-
going to focus on the changes.
It's not a huge thing. Again, but the fifth divergence, that's going to be,
Again, just as long as the commission's comfortable with only having my review document possibly on pretty short notice.
with how much we've covered it, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Does anybody else have an issue
No.
with that?
No,
Okay.
no.
Mr. Chairman, the only issue I have, I'm not available the next 2 weeks, unfortunately, I'm not going to be here.
Well, they're just talking about when when the revised materials.
That's fine, gotcha.
So Joe,
For you to
then-
review, gotcha.
Just email them out and then you can, whenever you're free, look at them.
The meeting would actually be on the 12th.
The meeting would be on Tuesday, October 12th.
Well, it's a Tuesday, though.
The office is closed for Columbus Day.
All right, so do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to continue the public hearing for the subject application known as Maxtown Property 169 LLC, zoning case number 2021-03 until October 12th at 7 PM in the, I don't know, in the Township Hall, okay. Additional or revised materials will be due to the Genoa Township Development and Zoning Department by, what did we say, September 24th at 4 PM.
I second the motion.
Joe?
Roll call, Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes, motion passes. That will conclude that meeting at 8:46 PM. Thank you very much. You can go. We're going to continue our meeting here in a minute, so we'll take quick 5 minutes for everybody to get out, and if you want to stay around and listen to the rest of it, please feel free to stay.
You're welcome.
Paul, are you paused?
Pardon me? The Board of Trustees. Yes. Well, I guess technically Paul Wise, the Township Administrator, and then the
Sorry, the time is now 8:48 PM, and we're back for additional business. Next on the agenda, discussion about the Hoover Watershed Overlay District.
My microphone wasn't on. Yes. Just an update, at the last Board of Trustees meeting the other week, the board did officially initiate that amendment, which basically serves as an application to the commission to now consider it. So it will be on your agenda at the October meeting, in addition to the continued hearing this evening. I believe I've sent you all emails out with a link to it. If you'd like hard copies, just let us know. We will get them to you. That's really all I have to say about that. We did not receive any new applications for the October 12th meeting. Today was the deadline, so as of right now, your calendar is the continued hearing, the amendment, and the chair and I had been discussing like the the rules of procedure document. I don't know if that's something we'll want to look at now that we've got 2 hearings on the agenda or not. So I'll have to consult with him as to whether or not that's something he wants on there. And then just another minor thing, I'll probably send out the draft schedule for, meeting schedule for next year. That's usually pretty quick, so that might be on your agenda as well. I'll get with the chair on that to see what his, what he wants to do with that as well.
So from the overall discussion of the overlay, is the goal, the next one is for us to read it and come back with comments? Are we working through line item by line item? What do we?
It's pretty much, it's gonna be just like this application. You're gonna review it and I think make your recommended edits to it. It's, I sort of view it as sort of like when the House, or the Senate makes a bill and then passes to the House, and then the House sort of makes their changes to it and sends it back to the Senate. That's a little bit of what we're doing
Joe,
here.
can I ask, what was the prompting to bring this back up since before it was sort of set aside?
I did have a resident mention some concerns to me about the general topic of the ongoing density issue. And with, I can't, I've got to be cautious with what I say here, but
I can say it.
there was timing in regards to other matters that were becoming resolved that made it less problematic for us to address this issue.
I think there's also concerns because I noticed Harlan Township is going through revising their comprehensive plan because Columbus is knocking on their door.
There's that too, yeah.
So we're just trying to get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, there was legal, there were some legal concerns about the timing of some one of these discussions could occur.
The timing when it would?
If we had been talking about this before.
Oh,
So
Thank you.
and some of those
Yeah.
concerns are no longer existing or are less severe of a concern now, so we felt like it was a better time.
Is it open for public comment then during our hearing, or does?
Yes, it'll be a full-blown public comment, public hearing scenario. So I guess that's a question. How would you like me to present? Do you want me to do any presentation, or what exactly are you looking for me in terms of, usually I'm reading a memo, but I'm not going to read the whole amendment to you, obviously.
My feedback is based on the kind of opposite way this has came around, and you've been highly involved in it, Joe. Obviously, it would be more efficient, in my opinion, for you to detail it in your memorandum process.
Yeah, I'll do a memorandum with more sort of like a bullet point outline of,
And
this is what
offer
it is,
some
this is what
history
it's doing.
Potentially too.
What's that? I'm
And
sorry?
offer some, you don't want to offer any history as to?
Yeah, that would be a good idea, sir.
I can offer a general history.
I think there should be some.
I think I can do that without creating any issues.
Right.
I was gonna say, I need to go back and look at it. I mean, I was gonna say, I don't wanna sit here all night going through the nitty-gritty technical type review, but I don't think a 10,000 foot, I think a 10,000 foot's too high. It probably needs to be the 2,500 to 5,000 foot view.
Now, a lot of it, it's not, it looks long when you open the PDF because it's like 90-something pages. A lot of that is pages that have absolutely new changes in it. It's the definition section in its entirety because there's two new definitions in there, but the whole definition section's in there. It's verbiage for each zoning district that gets repeated in each zoning district. So every single page of each zoning district is in that, even though it's essentially the same verbiage in each district. There are a couple of unrelated, I would say minor clarification changes that were made that aren't related to the Hoover Watershed Overlay District that we're just making because there was an opportunity to fix them and they shouldn't be, I don't believe they're going to be controversial or problematic. It's just housekeeping stuff. So we just thought we'd take that opportunity to do those now as part of this. I think the bulk of the discussion is really going to be about the contents of the new proposed Article 7. I don't want to get, since this isn't the public hearing, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but
Proposed what?
Article 7.
Article 7.
That's the article number where the new overlay district would be located, as drafted.
And so just for recording purposes that we've initiated, we're going to have it on the hearing. It's going to be open for public. And then what's the process, just so people know what the overall process is down
You'll go through your process of making any, documenting any revisions you think need to be made. And then you'll vote on the document, or you make no revisions and then you just vote on the document as presented. It's pretty much up to you how you want to proceed, whether or not you want to recommend revisions to the board or whether or not you just want to vote on it and make a recommendation on it as written.
And then once we vote on it, it goes back to the Board of Trustees.
The trustees, and they will consider any proposed revisions the zoning commission has come up with. And then they'll make their determination whether or not they want to accept them, reject them, modify them.
Joe, if that is the case and they codify the process, does it go to any other review? Because it's a watershed district issue, does it go to the county? Is there anything else that has to be done?
Regional planning will review it and offer you a recommendation. Hopefully I'll get a vote out, they will vote on it at the end of this month at their September meeting. That's statutorily required. So they will review it. We have given it to the city of Columbus. It's in their hands.
Right.
We're not required to get feedback from them, but we did give it to them, obviously as a stakeholder. But no, once the board approves it, there's no other additional review or anything has to go. It'll be subject to the 30-day referendum period, just like any rezoning is. But once that period passes, if no petitions are filed, then it's codified and it's in effect.
Got it. Good. All right, anything else open? Any other public comment?
I don't think so. Is there anything for me?
Public? Anything from us?
Can you print me a copy, please?
Yes.
Yeah,
I would,
I'll probably pick one up too, if
Please.
you don't mind.
Mr. Moore, you want a hard copy?
yeah.
Might as well just print one for everybody.
Yeah,
We'll
much
have them
easier
ready
to-
tomorrow by noon. You can stop in whenever we're open. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Much easier to
Thank you.
just mark stuff
Yeah,
and
I would agree.
go from
I totally get that.
All right, next meeting will be October 12th in here at 7 PM. We have tentatively have a site walk on October 19th. We'll see if anything's submitted by September 20th. Other than that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Aye. Opposed? We are done at 8:57 PM.